Graham, really appreciate the opportunity to sit down, and thank you very much for the time today. Maybe to begin with, you could just give a little bit of a background to your career, to your journey, and where it's taken you to today.
Okay. I'm the executive chairman of MediaSense, which I co-founded 16 years ago, and which we sold to private equity about 4 years ago. But that journey started in advertising in the 80s. So my career is one of two halves. The first half being corporate with large multinational advertising agencies in London and New York, and then becoming more entrepreneurial when I bought a design business and sold that, listed a digital agency business on the FTSE after lastminute.com, so we all know what happened then. And then a spate in consulting, but then I launched my own business with Andy, my business partner, 16 years ago. And we could talk about that particular journey, which I think is probably most interesting to your audiences, as we get into it.
Thank you for that. And the full journey is certainly interesting, but we'll dig into more of that in just a moment.
Sure.
What was it particularly about advertising to begin with? Did you fall into it? Did you love it initially and straight away?
I fell into it. And I found that eventually over time, that my skills was client service, strategy and creative thinking. And as my career progressed, it was those skills that I came to leverage and hone and found a business partner at MediaSense who had everything that was a perfect match, because he had everything that I didn't, and vice versa.
And that's often pretty important. I mean, there are certain VC funds, for example, who only invest, I know that wasn't the journey that you had, but there are certain VC funds who only invest in an organization when there are two co-founders that have complementary skills. As you said, your skill set was more on the creative side, the strategy side, client services. You had very complementary skills, I suppose, that enabled you to grow this business.
Yeah, when we sold originally, we were in what private equity would call small to mid cap, and they're investing in management teams, not just in one or two individuals. They're investing in a management team, and we had assembled a management team deliberately of complementary skills. I mean, in terms of Andy, my business partner, is very mathematical, very analytical, very financially literate. And he can do clients very well, but in a particular way. But that was my thing. And then we brought in proper financial expertise, proper HR, and proper commercial management. So we had the package for a private equity exit.
So let's dive into the topic of your specific expertise and your real strengths, which, as you said, are around client services, strategy, the creative thinking side of things, as well as many other areas. They can be quite fluffy topics. Strategy is a very fluffy topic. It can be. Client services as well, and creative thinking. So what does that boil down to, if we take them one by one?
Well, I'm not going to start with strategy. I'm going to start because you said, what do I bring to it? So client service, if you're in the service business, if you're in servicing, client service is absolutely paramount. I'm obsessive about client services. That doesn't mean that, and I keep saying to all of my teams, that doesn't mean the client's always right, because they're not. Clients come to us not to be told they're right, or just to be given, or just to find solutions. They're here to find solutions to their challenges. In our business, there are other dimensions, but I think the best relationship in a service business is one of mutual respect. Hard to achieve, easy to say, but much harder to achieve. So I live and breathe on client service. I have a view that if your staff are happy and your clients are happy, then you've got the foundations of a strong business. So obviously the staff side we might come on to. The creativity in media is about being able to think horizontally and laterally, horizontally and vertically.
I'll sort that bit out.
Good. If you only think in one dimension, you're not going to be able to grow your business, and you're not going to be able to service your clients. So my creativity is combining with client service is the ability, and what I've tried to engender in the company is the ability to think about solutions holistically, not just A to B, but maybe you might have to go through a couple of iterations along the way. So creative thinking differently. But all of that, I guess, which is the purpose of this conversation, is about strategy. So our strategy was really very simple when we launched the business. We were going to be everything that our biggest competitor wasn't. So we were going to be more digital, more strategic, and more collaborative. And that was the foundation of basically of what we did. So everything was, we analysed our competitor, which was hugely dominant in the market, and went out with a proposition that we were going to do everything that they couldn't do.
What was the proposition at the time? What was the elevator pitch for the organisation when you went to market?
When we started was, if you think about those three components, internal operating models, supplier relationships, and creation of value through analytics, in each of those areas we applied the same thing: be more digital, more strategic, and more collaborative, which was everything that our competitor wasn't. And that's really, and we managed to find a narrative that touched the frustration that clients had with the solutions that were currently available in the market. And we never, I think when we started out, we never really believed that we were going to become as large as we have. But sometimes there are inflection points along the way when you're growing a business, and seeing opportunities and exploiting them is absolutely key. So when we come on to strategy, I would say, Andy, my business partner, used to say, because being the more creative one, I'd come up with a new idea every day.
Yep.
But we use the F word, we use the focus word. You've got to be focused. We've got to stick. We've got this strategy, which we'll talk about in a moment. We've got to stick to it. So we can't go off on this tangent or that tangent. And we did. And the clients, and it resonated with clients. We found. We didn't, and we were very specific in terms of the clients we went after. We went after those that were looking for that we identified were looking for something different.
Yep.
We never got into price. We never went after clients that were just going to include us in the procurement process, to make up the numbers, or to be used as a discounter. And we've stuck rigidly to that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is earlier on you spoke about one of your core strengths or key skills was around obsession with clients, and then later on we've spoken about when you developed the business, this clarity on the pain points of those you wanted to serve, the ethos of the organization, and ultimately how you solve those pains for your particular clients. And I suppose it's the combination of that obsession, understanding of the pain points of those that you served, and then, as you said, focusing like mad and having this mad intensity to then go and make it happen.
Yes.
And then later on, more nuanced elements came into it. There was a greater vision for where you wanted to go to, but at the beginning it was, unless I'm wrong, that there's this pain point on the market, we're obsessed with solving that pain point, we have real clarity on what it is, and we're going to be dogged and have our blinders on in terms of solving that.
Should have had you doing it for me.
It's because I just heard you.
You've summed it up very well.
Because I just heard you talk about it for a couple of minutes. That's why. But that's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about the topic of strategy, and we both alluded to it a couple of times, It's a very loose topic. You've already said we had to think more strategically. We help clients think more strategically. We do the same thing. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So thinking strategically, or the topic of strategy as a whole, and this is a heavy question, to you, what does that mean?
Right. Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah.
For me, there was always, we had to have a North Star.
This is for your organisation?
For my organisation. And I would say the same thing to clients, is what's the North Star? If you don't know where you're going, any path will do, or go in any direction. And I think you have to have. For me, we had to have that North Star. So when we started out, it was basically to be everything that a competitor wasn't. We identified those things. As we grew, we stuck to those principles and scratched the itch that our clients had, frankly, until it bled.
Yeah.
After we had sold, which is the really interesting piece, we had to deliver. As anybody who sold to a private equity firm knows, you have to triple the business. That's what you sign up to. And we knew that, for example, doing it organically was not going to be enough. Even though we were growing at 20-30% per annum, we were not going to triple the business in 3 to 5 years by doing it that way. So our strategy was to expand out of media into specific other marketing services areas. And there you could just go anywhere. So we had to be very, very specific on what were the adjacencies that we were prepared to expand into and not be distracted. So what was the first adjacency, which was creative, what's the second one, etc., etc. And there it took quite a lot of discipline, because we had product development going on internally. We had the market changing substantially and significantly, and we had a desire to become much more global as well, which was also partly driven by the market. So we had to really prioritise what is it we want to do first, and second, and third, and stick to it, and then build the accountability model. This is cobbler's, because prior to this we had pretty much cobbler's shoes, which is we're in the accountability business, but we're not accountable in our own business. Is build the accountability model to know whether we're going in the right direction. Now, it helps being in a private equity ecosystem, because you have investors that have a very, very clear focus. Most of it financially driven. But nevertheless, I mean, you won't achieve those, in a private equity play, you won't achieve any of those objectives, those financial objectives, if you don't come back to the core thing, which is you've got a strong proposition, you've got great clients, and you've got great staff to execute on them. So, so having a clear strategy in terms of the North Star, and then what are the components that will get you there, and then how do you make, which is the key thing, is how do you make it accountable? And accountability of strategy, because a strategy without accountability is frankly, it's bollocks.
It's words on a page.
It's a wish list.
Yeah.
It's just a wish list.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and it's no surprise to hear me say it, because I live and breathe it every day with clients, but also internally. But one of the biggest challenges, I believe, is bridging that gap between strategy, so strategic planning, words on a page, a document, a plan, and execution. How do you actually build accountability within the teams? How do you get people to believe in it? How do you get people to buy in? And ultimately, how do you get them to deliver? How did that process look like for you as an organisation internally? Was it a very formal process of building the strategy? You locked yourself in a room, yourself and your business partner and management team? Was it with consultants? What did that process look like?
It wasn't. We're not a very large business. We had an idea. We tested it with our clients and in the marketplace, and just went for it. We're a very entrepreneurial organisation, and we didn't go through a lengthy process with outside consultant. Well, actually, I bet you know that's not true.
I was going to say, you also sound almost apologetic about it, but you definitely shouldn't.
No, I'm not
definitely shouldn't.
No, because we did work with a consultant actually, who, in fact, two. In fact, the first one was somebody who was basically was on our board, and who just gave us was a really good sounding board. Mm-hmm. But he introduced us to somebody, I'll give her a name check, Caroline Johnson, who basically took apart our service model, which was a bit of a Chinese menu. Because what happens is, particularly in smaller companies, is you add services, right? And you think that by adding the services, you're creating a proposition. Mm-hmm. You're not. You're just adding to a Chinese menu, and that's what we had. And she was the one who basically said, "You do three things. You know, if you distill it all down, you do these three things, and you should articulate it in that way, and because those three things solve three particular problems, and all the services." All the drawers in all the drawers with all the tools and stuff in it is what will make that proposition sing. It'll be deliverable. Sorry, it'll help deliver those services, those three core propositions.
So again, it comes down to clarity on the customer's pains, real understanding of how we can solve them, clarity on the value proposition, and then going and committing to it.
Yeah.
In terms of the commitment and the accountability, and as someone who has sat and sits in the seat that you sit in as a co-founder, CEO, now chairman, what are your big pains? What are your big challenges when it comes to strategic plan execution? Of course, there are many outside of that, but what are the things that have you staring at the ceiling or banging the desk or whatever it may be?
Not getting distracted.
Okay.
There is so much noise in companies. There are so many things to distract you from driving that strategy forwards. You know, in a service business where 70% of your or even more of your cost is staff, you can't do with them. You can't do without them. Right, no, it's the wrong way around. Sorry, but you know what I mean. You can't build the business without great people. Yeah. There are clients who want lots of different things, and you have to learn to say no, or say and just say we just don't do that. That's not in our but and then introducing somebody who can. So there are so many distractions. There's the marketplace and all the noise that's going on in the marketplace. What are your competitors doing? You shouldn't ignore all that, but you need to filter it. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that will distract. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't calibrate along the way, and be, but otherwise you just become. If you listen to all the noise and react to all the noise, you will just get completely lost in the woods, and you'll go off track, and things will start to slip. So I think there is a fine balance between doggedly focusing on the strategy that you've set and being responding to the noise. And I think as a CEO and now as chair, our responsibility is to be that filter, and sometimes go, I understand that's important, but it's not a priority. And I can give a number of examples where we had an acquisition strategy and other businesses came along that were shiny, profitable, looked great, and would love to buy, but they weren't on strategy. And and the amount of time it takes to buy a business, the amount of effort it takes, as well as obviously the cash, could be a massive distraction. So there were 2 or 3 occasions we just have to go, no, we're just not going to go there. Our plan is right. We know it's right. We've tested it. Don't get distracted.
So there's as much about what to do as what not to do. If anything, more emphasis on the not to do.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And then there's obviously the internal management, which is, this is our plan. We have to keep BAU is critical, maintaining BAU. So all the metrics and all the management reporting that goes with that. We try to keep management reporting really tight, so we don't spend lots of time writing big decks,
which is very easy to do.
Which is very
time consuming, but easy to do.
Yeah, it's succinct data and insight is what I stress, rather than long-winded reports that basically, which often managers will do because they want to show that they're busy and doing stuff. But actually, I'm not interested in the stuff. I'm interested in what matters.
Yep.
And keeping them focused on the end game when they are also subject to noise and distractions. We have obviously revenue targets, NPS targets, and profitability targets, as well as staff satisfaction targets. And those four components, we set those things every year. We have our product development strategy, we have our acquisitions strategy, all part of a bigger plan, and we have to stick to it. And we're not going to. We will only deviate with good reason, with very good reason. One of my clients taught me this great phrase, which is, in terms of what we do, is be as consistent as you can be, and as different as you, and only as different as you absolutely have to be.
So what emerges for me is around focusing on what to do, but also what not to do.
Yep.
Focusing on what matters. And then there's a word that you've mentioned, and I've mentioned a couple of times, which is around accountability. And we've spoken about it previously as well. How do you build that accountability within the management team, within the wider team, especially as the business is growing? Because it's grown significantly over the years, and it's grown to something which isn't just an office in London, but is now in the Far East, in the US, and so on.
How do you build that? How do you build in accountability? You set the goal. I try not to do it. I mean, obviously numbers are important, but I think you have to set not only the numbers, but also some of the softer things, and whether that, which are enablers. So they're whether it's staff satisfaction, whether it's, but look, accountability is ultimately about, this is what we said we're going to do. What are the criteria that will tell us that we've achieved it, or we're going in the right direction? And every management meeting, from the board down to subcommittees, are about, this is the criteria, or these are the metrics. How are we performing against them? And it's really hard to do that. It is really hard to do that because. And keeping it, because everybody obviously tries to game it.
Well, everyone's looking out for their own interest as well.
Of course they are. Because there are financial incentives that are attached to it. But ultimately, I think it's, if people are bought in, so communication is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. People have to know not only what they have to do, but they have to understand why they have to do it. Because if they're not bought in, then the gaming just becomes a nightmare, and the whole management process will unravel, or you'll just spend a lot of time dealing with a lot of shit, basically, and that's just not productive. So if you can buy-in is essential. So accountability comes after buy-in, basically. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, you can say these are your targets, go and hit them, but it's much easier if people have actually said, I understand why I'm doing this, and I agree that it's the right, and I agree. Now, you're never all going to always agree, because you just can't have that.
Especially when you're 200 people plus, or...
Yeah. I mean, you can't. There are always going to be some people who disagree, and you have to make a decision whether to keep those people in the organisation. But ultimately, there's a difference between disagreeing and challenging. You can challenge, but eventually this is the direction we're going, and hopefully people will accept that and go on that journey with you and buy into it and deliver it.
Now, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but just a couple of other questions. Specifically around the topic of M&A and as an organisation which has both been acquired by private equity, but then subsequently have acquired a number of other businesses and amalgamated that as part of MediaSense. How challenging is it to try to cascade down the overriding strategy of MediaSense, of the central organisation, to these complementary businesses which have been acquired, whilst at the same time retaining the core ethos of said business?
Right. So there's two levels to that. There's the hearts and the minds, and then there's the wiring. They're on the Azure stack. Someone's on else's
CRM and IT infrastructure.
Stack. Yeah, all of that stuff, right? And you absolutely have to nail the stuff, right? Yeah, and make those decisions and have the people in place before you do the acquisition that can deal with all of that.
That's the hygiene factor. That has to happen.
It has to happen. It's BAU work. It can be tiring. It can be exhausting. It can be frustrating. But at the end of the day, the first part of your question is the most important piece. So, the types of businesses that we acquired, we're not buying manufacturers. Where we've got to buy. We had a very clear strategy. Basically, we wanted to expand geographically. We wanted to expand in capability-wise. So, the businesses that we would only acquire businesses that fulfilled those two criteria. And the size of the businesses that we were buying were generally founder owners.
Okay.
The important thing is that you do the hard conversations about vision and complementarity and goals before you sign the deal.
Yeah.
And in the case of the businesses that we bought, they were bought into our strategy, and they could see how they were going to fit into it. And they sold, of course, because they decided to get, of course, for the money. I'm not naive, but they bought into our vision. And of course, when you're in private equity ownership, there is a timeline.
Of course, yeah.
To exit. So I would say that we come back to where we started, which is focus, strategy and focus, right? Getting those people bought in beforehand into the strategy. They understand how they fit into it and why we are having the conversation makes everything else so much easier. Similarly, with the existing organisation, which was the MediaSense of ownership, the mothership, if you like, if people understand why you've bought these businesses, and they bought into this, and they agree with the strategy, which I had presented 2 years ago, they go, okay, I get it. Now then, all the other stuff that we've talked about, different titles, different remuneration packages, that's all it's hard to deal with, and it can be very disruptive. Particularly titles and remuneration packages for obvious reasons. But if you stick to this is why, this is where we're going, and this is why we've done it, and this is how we're going to deal with these challenges, and you have to give us time, so there is a beginning, middle, and end, which I think is always really important. That people know that how long it's going to take.
As you said at the beginning, it's the clarity on the journey. If you don't know where you're going, any road will do.
Yeah. Exactly.
But you need to have an understanding of, we're going on this road, this is what the journey will look like, we think, and this is how we're going to tackle it.
Exactly. And time box it. There is it's really, because the problem is that it's like with deals, time kills deals. Integration, time it's exhausting if it just goes on and on and on. So you have to take the difficult decisions early on, and sometimes there's fallout from that. But if you stay focused on the end goal, and you bring people with you, and you communicate in a service business, at least that's my experience, then people will come with you.
Last question then is related to the fact that we live in a very volatile world, and we live in a very volatile world in a number of different ways. There's geopolitical and so on. But I want to focus in on technologically the way that the industry is moving, and I was going to say since you started advertising the 80s and that, but even in the last year, technologically how things have moved on. Is strategy work in terms of building, communicating, executing strategy more challenging now, you believe, because the world is moving so quick? I mean, we were speaking just before about the rapid changes in AI and how our own business has changed and the changes within your business. Is it more difficult now? Do you need to be more agile? Do you need to have further iterations?
I think strategy is more important now than probably, well, it's always been important. It's because it's always been important. But I think you do have to be more agile now. We do staff town halls, the big formal ones every twice a year. And 2 years ago, somebody said to me, who are our biggest competitors? What keeps you awake at night? And I said, I know my competitors intimately. What keeps me awake at night is the competitor that's going to come from left of field, and doesn't even exist today.
Yeah.
And that is going to happen.
The devil, and
that's going to happen. And that's what keeps me awake. And that's why, whilst I started by saying, develop a strategy, stay focused on it, filter out the noise. I guess I should have said don't filter out too much, because there is going to be a competitor, or something is going to happen that is you didn't expect, and it is going to change, and it is going to change you. I mean, I'm pushing people, our teams now, we have to have an AI strategy. But that's just one example. I mean, we're not going to get into all the trade wars and everything, but but I think strategy is as important as it has always been, but actually, and filtering out the noise is as relevant as it's always been. But some versatility to significant and long-term changes, not short-term changes, is really important, because, as you say, technology is changing things faster than we can anticipate.
Lastly then, and on that topic, nothing confidential, but what's next for MediaSense as an organisation?
We are going to continue to build out capabilities. We're going to continue to expand. Our strategy. We were in the media only business. We're now into other marketing services areas. So the acquisitions that we've bought have taken us into the content space, into the creative space. We will move into other disciplines, other marketing services related disciplines, so we can offer a full suite of we can cover the full marketing service ecosystem for our clients. Now, they won't necessarily buy all of it, but we can offer a holistic and integrated solutions.
Fantastic. Well, look, really appreciate the time.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate the conversation through the journey and through MediaSense, as well as all the other components as well. And look forward to chatting further.
Thank you.
Thank you.